Hey folks, David Stewart here. Welcome to a new kind of video and a new channel, really. What I'm going to be doing is reading YouTube comments and responding to them verbally and on video. I did this a little bit with my Last Jedi videos and they were reasonably well received and I had a good time doing it. So I thought I'd try doing as many of my comment responses as possible in video form. And there's a few reasons for that, other than they were well received. I feel like I could be more efficient to just give a verbal response to something versus having to type it out. It's also more efficient in the sense that I'm not distracted by comments throughout the day. I'm always task focused on what I'm doing. Like I very often, if I feel a little bit of boredom, I kind of want to pull up my phone and look at comments and respond to them, but it's kind of hard to it's kind of slow for me to do that. So I end up just reading them and not responding to them. I actually read a lot of them. So if they're kind of in one little area, you know, the comment response video, then it's a little bit easier for me to have task focus elsewhere. And I think it also just might be more entertaining. There's a little bit of extra information that occurs when somebody says something verbally versus when they just write it down. There's inflections in the voice, and then, you know, you can get to hear me go on my diatribes or whatever else I feel like doing, my tangents. So here we go. Let's take a look at some comments right now. What I'll probably do going forward is I'll probably have these for like each major video and link them a week or two after the fact so you can hear your comments, hear me respond to them or bring them to light for everybody else. And I'll probably do some videos that are like what this one is I'm just going to go through the comments because I have so many comments and some of them are on really old videos and I don't want to ignore those. But it's really hard to keep track of them all. Just like with Last Jedi, I get hundreds of comments a day. It's really hard for me to read and respond to all of them. However, I feel like there's a lot of value in those discussions. I want people, this should be like a social media thing. People should be able to have their opinion be received by someone on another end. So let's go through it. First one, no one likes Superman, not since he died the first time. That would happen when I was a kid. But I think that's not true because they still sell comics for Superman, so somebody must like him. I haven't really read Superman comics in a long time, though. This Last Jedi is okay. Last Jedi sucks. That's what that one says. Agreed on all points. Yeah, good. I wouldn't be so pissed off about Axanar getting squashed if CBS/Paramount made decent Trek films and TV, but all they seem to make is Trek. So the reason fans were really excited about Star Trek Axanar and Alec Peters' $1 million fan film project was because they weren't getting served by the company that owns Star Trek. CBS and Paramount weren't making they weren't making any Trek series at the time. The last one was Enterprise, which a lot of fans were disappointed by, though I actually liked it. And then you had the Abrams-verse movies. You had these two movies by J.J. Abrams that fans tended to really not like. So the response was, well, we'll make our own films that serve what the fans want directly. What better way to do that than with the fan film? And Axanar looked like it was going to have high production value and great actors and all this kind of stuff. Got squashed through the legal struggle. You could still look up the Prelude to Axanar on YouTube, and it's pretty cool. It takes kind of like a documentary, like the war happened in the past format about humans and Romulans fighting. It was all very interesting to fans. But I feel like this happens actually with lots of older IPs that are corporately owned. So you haven't seen this happen really with Tolkien's IPs. I mean, you could argue it with like Shadow of Mordor games, but it's not like quite the same where you have something that's supposed to be official, like officially canon or something, and it's not good and it like destroys the franchise the way we've had with Star Wars. So Star Wars and Star Trek, big fandoms, big IPs. The people who created them have either passed on from this world, like Gene Roddenberry, or have sold the franchise and handed it off to other people. And those people didn't create the franchise and don't have the attachment to it and don't have the philosophy in mind that created that franchise. And so the result is something that's very empty and seems very bereft of what made fans to begin with. And I think we see that with the new Star Wars movies, and I think we could see that with the new Star Trek stuff as well. Now, when Gene Roddenberry died, he handed it off basically to Rick Berman. Rick Berman is the guy who took over, And there's varied opinions about Rick Berman. I like the Rick Berman era of Star Trek. He made the characters more human, which I actually appreciated, versus Gene Roddenberry really wanted the characters to be very, very much like paragons. Like, they were really awesome characters, and it was a utopian, socialist, atheist future, and all this sorts of stuff. And I appreciate that take on sci-fi, but it was great to have those human elements brought in. Looking back, I think Deep Space Nine was probably the series that I enjoyed the most, especially when it was on, and that was basically all Rick Berman. Especially the later, the last 7 or the last 5 seasons of it were really good. I remember being really good and really liking them. So that's why we want Axanar, and that's why Axanar didn't happen, in a sense. So corporate IP ownership really tends to just drown the quality of good franchises, I feel like. If you can keep ownership of an IP in an individual or small group's hands, it tends to do much better. It's why Tolkien's IP is pretty much never going to be, we're never going to feel like the IP is destroyed, because there's really nothing that you add to his books. Like, you can maybe hire someone to write another novel based on a story in the Silmarillion, but it won't really affect people's opinion of the original stuff. And just as like the Lord of the Rings movies didn't change people's opinion on the novels. It's that corporate IP ownership and this ongoing development of canon and characters that tends to be dangerous and tends to forget why fans liked it in the first place. That's my whole diatribe on this. Now, this is like an essay here on why Captain America's Civil War didn't suck, I think. I understand some of your dislike. I only thought it kind of sucked, so I only disliked it a little bit. But there was, kind of like, there's a lot of fun things in Civil War. It just didn't have much of a plot that made sense to me. So, like, half of the Avengers agreeing government oversight and Tony Stark's reason for agreeing are a bit close. So I think your disbelief of certain elements, like half of the Avengers agreeing to government oversight and Tony Stark's reason for agreeing, are a bit closed. Now, a bit closed is actually a weasel word, so I'm just going to point that out to you if you're watching. Either I'm wrong or I'm not wrong. So a bit closed means like you're saying, well, you're closed-minded about that. It's like, yeah, but there's no virtue to an open or a closed mind. The virtue is in the truth. So I vehemently disagree with the government oversight argument, but there are plenty of people in the world with different principles than me, and I would believe agree with it, and the reasons the characters in the movie agree with it are clear enough. Now, here's the thing. Nobody wants government oversight of themselves. Nobody wants that. I've never met a person that says, I want the government to come in and tell me what to do for my own good. Everybody wants to use the government for someone else's good, to oversee somebody else, to punish somebody else, to make somebody else do something. Nobody asks the government to come in and control their operation of firearms. It's like, we got to keep guns out of that other guy's hands. We have nobody says, I really want a homeowners association to tell me to cut my lawn every week. No, it's like, Bill down the street doesn't cut his lawn. We need to form a homeowners association and make him cut his lawn. So the people who want government oversight either want the government to do something to somebody else, or they're in the government and they want to do something to somebody. They want the oversight themselves. If you look at the Avengers, of course the government wants to have the power of the Avengers. If they're super powerful supermen capable of saving the Earth, if you, as the UN, could gain control of that, you could create like a worldwide tyranny. Of course, like the hyper corrupt UN would want to have oversight over superheroes because they want the power. So those are the two kinds of people. It's either people who want the power used on someone else, never them. Nobody wants the government to come in and shove a gun down their throat and tell them what to do, or threaten them with jail for doing or not doing something else. Or they are in the government and they want that power for themselves, which is, and of course, because I know about the UN, it's like, only an idiot would want the UN to have any oversight over them at all. Like, would say that UN oversight of me is a good thing. It's like, no, it's not. The UN's like hyper corrupt. We'll do another video on that, but that's I can't read this whole thing. I'm sure there's a lot of great points in there, but I'll just do that one. Nobody actually wants government oversight of themselves. That's not true. The weirdest Marysue for me came, this is on my, I've been getting a lot of comments on this, Marysue, Paragon, Everyman. Basically, if you combine Paragon and Everyman, you get a Marysue. The weirdest Marysue for me came from the Raven's Shadow trilogy, which I don't know of. The first novel is brilliant and shows no sign of an inexperienced writer, but in the second, new character point of view is introduced, and my god, full Marysue down to the last detail, probably because, like Star Wars, the writers are so high on their feminism that they somehow forgot that the very basics of writing. Okay, so this is always a question. Is something written badly because somebody's a bad writer, or is it written badly because of feminism or social justice warrior, whatever it is? Feminism, I'll do another video on this. Feminism is such a broad thing. It's really hard to talk about feminism. Whereas you can talk about social justice warriors, which have a worldview that includes part of feminism, but most women I meet are feminists and are not social justice warriors. You know, they're moderates or something, or they're even conservative. They call themselves conservative feminists. So, but you know, let's call it social justice warriorism or something. Is that what causes the bad writing? Well, I think you actually, now I've kind of revised my opinion. You can attribute a lot of it to the social justice warrior types for a couple of reasons that I'm gonna hypothesize. The first one is, I don't think, you know, you may have incompetent writers, but you have lots of people checking scripts and checking movies. Hundreds of people have to sign off on a script or a movie idea before it gets made or while it's being made. So someone along the way would have to be able to understand that, like, Rey was a terrible character and what she was doing made no sense. So why didn't they stop it? Well, there's a couple reasons. The first one is that if you were to write Rey as a competent female who has opposition that she has to overcome and growth that has to occur, like any good character, you would possibly open yourself up to social justice warrior attack. And we saw this with Joss Whedon in the Avengers, where, you know, he professes to be more than a feminist, a genderist. He makes up his own awesome term for himself. And as much as I might make fun of that, he really got hammered hard by the social justice warriors over, like, very minute things. And I don't think it was about him. I mean, it was it was an attack on him, not an attack on his ideas, because it was an opportunity to attack a white male for not adhering close enough to whatever social justice narrative was popular at that particular time. So it could be that someone sees that and says, we can't have Rey be rescued because that reinforces the damsel in distress stereotype, right? So we'll have to have her free herself, and we'll just have her do a Jedi mind trick to get through it. Okay, so the bad writing's there, and it's been allowed because somebody's afraid of a feminist backlash. That's kind of my hypothesis there. I think Rey was Rey mostly for marketing, because you know all the boys are going to buy tickets. If you can get more girls in the seats or get more girls to buy the toys, it's going to be a win. Of course, other people have made content on this. Those toys are not really flying off shelves. And I think the toys are not flying off shelves because the characters are not relatable or interesting. You want a toy Luke Skywalker because you like Luke Skywalker. You like the character. You want a toy Obi-Wan Kenobi because he was cool and you liked him. If you don't like the character, you're not going to buy the toy from it. Or if the movie didn't make you think about the characters after it ended, then the merchandise isn't going to sell. And that's something about the long game that Disney may learn from this, that they, you know, I think they got slam dunks in, like, Avengers stuff. And I don't know why they're not applying the same lessons to this, but it, you know, could be Kathleen Kennedy. There's wrong people in charge of the IP, and they're kind of shooting themselves in the foot by having allowing bad writing or encouraging bad writing to avoid social justice warrior backlash, or, you know, because I can't think of a reason that somebody who's a feminist would want to write a character that undermines feminism. But I haven't seen any social justice warriors attacking Kathleen Kennedy for making Rey a bad, unrealistic character that tells girls that they can do anything they want without having to try. You know, I haven't seen anyone on that side of things come out and talk about how bad a feminist character she is. But if you were to if you were to look at, feminism from a classic perspective, that doesn't indicate any kind of female power or overcoming the patriarchy. She's just powerful by herself. There's nothing to gain. So it's interesting. And you certainly aren't like converting anyone by showing a character that nobody likes. So anyway, I know that's a long diatribe there, but there you go. I hope you make more music. I did. I came up with an album in 2000. I knocked a cookie thing on the floor. Came out with an album in 2017 called Memories Adrift by David V. Stewart Zool. You can check it out. It's cool. It's mostly like ambient rock and minimalism. So it's cool. One thing I've observed about sophists is they seem to always call you the sophist when you disagree with them. I actually have not seen them ever call me sophist because sophist is not a word in their vocabulary. They have, however, gotten angry and said that me pointing out their straw man is a straw man or is a fallacy, which is not true. So a straw man's when somebody makes up an argument that they then attribute to me and then argue against it. You're literally arguing against nothing when you do that. So I just say, have fun burning that straw man, or that's a straw man, or I didn't say that. And then they're like, yes, you did. And it's like, I didn't. And so goodbye. And it's like, you're just saying straw man. That's your only argument. It's like, no, you haven't made an argument because you're arguing against literally nothing. You're having an argument in your head with an imaginary person that you're put my face on, and they might really believe that I said that, in which case, Scott Adams is right. They're hallucinating that I said stuff. And I think that is actually highly probable with lots of people. Maybe we can talk about it in some other video. Male version's called Gary Stu. Yeah. Vader in Empire saw Luke as an opportunity to make him, Anakin, feel better about his decisions by having his young, innocent son join him and support those decisions. I disagree. I think he saw Luke's power, because he's dark side, and saw that with Luke's power, he could achieve his vision, which is a unified, peaceful empire. We can see this with Anakin's character in the prequel trilogy. He's obsessed with order and getting rid of conflict and making people agree. You can already see the seeds of it in episode 2. And so I think that's really his motivation. I think Darth Vader wants peace, but through his own means of power, because he only really trusts power to accomplish it. I can't, this is on Last Jedi, I can't believe that it had even that much of a thought behind it. Even postmodernism requires some level of high thought. But the nihilism is a result of postmodernism, not necessarily, right? So if you use postmodernism to indoctrinate someone, they may be unaware that what they know with critical theory or something like that is postmodernism or social Marxism. It's just their worldview, and so then they're just going to express that. Token diversity, romance tropes, and shallow character development, overall idiocy in the characters. There's a higher chance you're giving them way too much credit, even if it was postmodern. It's a possibility. I may be giving them too much credit. Maybe less intentional and more just the result of someone else's intention. That's likely as well. Now that's an argument. While I disagree with some things you say about Star Wars films, this is absolutely on the money. Well said and argued. I'm not sure which argument, but thank you. This is a long one. I may not be able to read this entire one. I work in television animation. Cool. When I write a script, I always start out as an architect, but end up as a gardener. The first thing to decide is the point of the story, something that could be summed up in one sentence. We call that a log line in the business. Could be the moral of the story, the plot of the story, or the theme. Or it could be something that's like, it's like Ocean's 11, but in space. That's what I thought of with Rogue One, and it didn't fulfill that expectation. Then I plot it out scene for scene, beginning, middle, and end. The most important part is the end. I have to know where the story's going so I can get there as I write. Yeah, that's really important. A lot of people begin writing a book, they don't know where they're going with it, and then they stop halfway through because they're like, I don't know what happens next. Have to know the plot goal, at least know the plot goal, and then you can do quite a bit of gardening on your way there. And I do quite a bit of gardening in my like micro stuff, but generally each big plot point, it's all planned out for me. At this point, I have to make a one-page outline for approval by the producer, director, and broadcaster. Different studios use different terminology. Some call it a treatment, some call it a one-sheet, some call it a synopsis, some call it an outline. This outline plots out the story and may include dialogue to get across what the scene's about. Find one page is sufficient for my purpose, an 11-minute animated show. Obviously, if you're writing something longer, movie or novel, then the outline would be longer. Then I start the actual script writing, and this is where I go from architect to gardener. Yeah, so you know the stuff that's going to happen, and then when you're writing the actual dialogue, that's where you get to be a gardener, and that's basically the way that I operate as well. I don't plot out, I don't even plot out each individual scene. I plot out each kind of area of the plots. I go, in this part, they're in this part of the world, and then I write some stuff with that. Fully fleshing out each scene, often stray from what the outline had. The basic idea of the scene remains, but the mechanics may change. For example, let's say I had a scene in the outline where the main character gets embarrassed in front of his love interest while playing a sport. The whole point of the scene is to make the main character embarrassed in front of the love interest. It doesn't matter how you get there. So I may change the scenario from a sport to something else, a school field trip or a shopping mall. Maybe by the time I get to that scene, I may have strayed from the outline earlier. Yeah, so all stuff, and then the script's complete. You go through the revision process, and voila, eventually you have a final script. Awesome. Yeah, that's a great comment. And that's pretty much how I approach both script writing. Definitely script writing. Script writing, I feel like you got to be way more on the dot as far as your beats, especially when you're writing a movie script or anything where you have a really specific limit. 11 minutes, that is really specific. 2 hours, ends up being really specific. Star Wars 1, 2, 3 were last ones that the movies were the best. Literally just watched a bit of the second one and seen The Last Jedi and can tell the second movie is like 10 times better. The Last Jedi didn't feel like Star Wars. It was really different. Also, I think the prequels just have so much more detail. The characters are perfect. George did an amazing job. I'm going back through. I'll be doing some content on all the prequels and of course all the original trilogy as well. Some analysis and talking about some of the things that are really I think overlooked with some of them, and episode 1 is one of those that, like, in terms of detail, it's amazing, and it's actually better in terms of detail than the newer ones. But because of fan expectations, just like with Last Jedi had fan expectations, because of fan expectations, it ended up being not as well received as it possibly could have been, and that definitely had flaws, and I'll talk about those too. Luke Skywalker had to struggle to become what he is. Rey, on the other hand, has zero growth. She knows everything from the beginning. Yep. Luke, throughout Star Wars, the first movie, is constantly being saved by Obi-Wan or his friends. He does almost nothing on his own, if you go and look at it. And that's part of the hero's journey, is that the hero has to be saved a bunch of times before he gains enough competence to do everything for himself. And even when it comes to blowing up the Death Star, Obi-Wan's ghost has to come and remind him, hey, I'm coming here to remind you that you can do this and use the Force, Luke, and then he doesn't, all that stuff that happens in Force Awakens will be explained in the next movie. Oh, too bad. I have a question. Do you think genre or style of the content across all mediums that you're consuming matters when you're consuming all at once? I don't think it does. Like last week, I was reading a crime detective novel and was playing LA Noire on the PS4. It was a perfect coincidence and decided to look for more movies to watch containing noir. But this week, I'm still reading the crime novel, but I finished LA Noire and I'm playing Star Wars Battlefront. You think that I should only seek to consume content that's similar to the other ones and that it's okay to be consuming content of all genres? I think you consume everything all at once. Whatever's interesting, that's what you should look at. And if you're looking at it from an artistic point of view, you should look at it and see what in it is compelling to you and see if you can figure that out. Because if it's compelling to you, it'll probably be compelling to somebody else. And whether that's Star Wars Battlefront or it's, LA Noire as games, if you're a game designer, or even if you're a filmmaker or something, games can offer a lot of insight. I think because they tend to be more expansive stories often, and an interactive experience is a little bit different effect. But yeah, I think it's fine to consume lots of different things, and it's probably good because then you have better references because of the way our anchoring biases tend to work throughout time. We're comparing things around to each other, whatever's closest, and so if you have a lot of variety, it helps you have a better judgment of what's going on. Like if you listen to nothing but black metal, and then you may end up having a different opinion of an album than if you listen to one black metal album and you were listening to some other albums at the same time, and pop or orchestral music or something like that, then you'd probably end up with a different opinion of that black metal album, because you're not comparing it to other black metal albums. You're comparing it first to the things that are surrounding it in your consumption. So it may end up being a more unique or memorable experience that way. So I think it's good to have a lot of variety. What's the proper term for a male Marysue? I think it's Gary Stu. Doesn't matter though. I mean, Star Trek is full of male Marysue characters, but you don't knock that. They're paragons. So they're not male Marysues other than Will Wheaton's character, Wisely Crusher. So they're all older, experienced men and older, experienced women. And the errors that they make are usually errors in judgment, not errors of lack of training or lack of experience or lack of intelligence or lack of thought. They don't have growth necessarily to accomplish, but they could still make, say, errors in judgment. Especially the original Trek, Gene Roddenberry wanted these paragon characters. They're not just paragons because they're experienced crew members, but they're also paragons because they're from a more evolved period in human history, a peaceful, like, utopian society, utopian socialist society. And that's really what Gene Roddenberry wanted to promote. And everyone was atheist and probably better for it, I think is one of the quotes he said. So I'm not knocking it because that's not the truth. They're not Marysues, because they're not a bunch of young people with no experience. They have no reason to be as good as they are. A real Marysue in Star Trek would be like you beamed someone out of the 20th century and he can fly the starship and he's 12 years old. You know, that's a Marysue. And Marysue in Star Trek fan fiction, where it's from, it should be Marysue is the youngest graduate of the Starfleet Academy. And at 17 years old, everybody's fawning over her, and then she has the grace to die at the end of the story. Is something that I think gets thrown around a lot too. So when you base the term in femininity, that belies some of the chauvinism. Some of that chauvinism carries on. You want to sound objective, neuter your terms. I didn't come up with the term, so I don't have to neuter anything. And since you don't need it to be neutered and you're aware that it could be a male Marysue, then you don't need it neutered either. So this comment is really just not only misunderstanding what I'm talking about. I'm sure the term originated in a more chauvinistic time period. Well, it came from female fan fiction characters because women were writing a lot of Star Trek fan fiction. Star Trek has always shown a lot of women, even in the 60s. It had, you had O'Hara, who was a black woman in an officer's position. That's very progressive for the time. So there's always been a lot of women writing in Star Trek and interested in Star Trek, and that's not a bad thing. Star Trek, at least throughout most of its history, it's never had what most people would say like the SJW, the social justice warrior narrative of like female ascendancy. It's really about competent women and showing that women can also have command in things, rather than showing women as like superior to men, or men as oppressors or something like that. The men as oppressors isn't present in Star Trek because it's from a more evolved period. Even if the people who were writing it believe that, they believe that, hey, people moved past that, and this is a more utopian society where men and women are judged more equally, So I don't need to neuter anything. And saying you don't need it neutered either. That's the important thing. It's like, why did you neuter your terms? You don't need them neutered. So what's the point? The term means what it means. I agree that Rey has the qualities of a Marysue, but I think it works fine in terms of the Star Wars universe. And I did significantly disagree on that because you see her doing things that make no sense with the past of Star Wars. Remember, Anakin was pretty much a nobody, and also probably about half Rey's age when he was able to do all that he did in Episode 1. Build a pod racer and win a race, and piloting a ship to blow up the control ship. He piloted the ship on accident, which was dumb, but that's totally different from using the Force the way Rey does. Rey does a Jedi mind trick, and makes huge bunches of rocks fly around a week after she learned the Force was a thing. It's really not comparable. You can make a case that Anakin's being able to build a droid as a kid. Maybe he's a super genius, but it's kind of like Marysue-ish. But at the same time, I think Lucas was aware of that, which is why Anakin essentially, he doesn't even really win the race by his own merits. He doesn't blow up the ship. He accidentally flies the ship up there and accidentally blows it up. And George Lucas made it an accident because he knew nobody would believe a kid was doing it. And at that point, he should have realized that never should have cast a kid that young as Jake Lloyd as Anakin. He should have had a teenaged or older Anakin that was already, an experienced pilot that people thought was good at what he was doing, an experienced racer or something. And then he could have actually contributed his skill somehow, but not have had the force powers that he takes literally years to develop all the force powers that he does, like bunches of years, and Rey takes a week. So that's the thing. Rey's power would still be dormant and probably would never have been uncovered without the series of events in Episode 7 that led her to Finn, Han, and the Resistance. Well, the thing is, Luke had those things, and his powers didn't awaken. He didn't magically learn all the Force tricks from nobody. He had to go train with Yoda. The whole reason for her powers given by Snoke in 7 and repeated in 8, with darkness rises and light to meet it. That's not an explanation. That doesn't mean anything. So she's the balance in the Force to counteract Ben Solo's darkness. And nobody wants to argue that Kylo Ren's powers, but you have to. Kylo Ren had to train to learn his powers too, and he was learning from Snoke. He didn't just magically know them. She's a terrible character and it makes no sense. Luke played the same part in 4 as the balance to Vader's darkness. I don't think so. It wasn't about Vader's darkness. It was about Vader's redemption. It's not pointless in the sense that we know it'll. Oh yeah, Rogue One is pointless. It's not pointless in the sense that we know how it would go down. It's pointless because it's a story with no moral. The prequels, fear leads to suffering. Do not be afraid to lose the things you love. Learn to let go. The originals, there's no greater power than family because family sticks together. Forgives no matter how prodigal. The sequels, you'll never be as powerful as Darth Vader, a burnt cripple in a BDSM suit with an asthma and back child support. Okay. Yeah, there's no point in the sequels. There's no reason for people to do the things they do. I went over that. Great video. I'm criticized for calling Rey a Marysue, but I do say that Rey could be a better character. Yeah. If she has a backstory, use it to establish her. Yeah. Show us why she is so good. Yeah. The Marysue and Gary Stu characters are boring and stale because they do not develop. They really cannot, and nobody buys her toys as a result. There's no relationship. You can't have an attachment to a character that has no flaws and has no struggle. You just don't. That's not the way stories end up working on the human psyche usually. When you write an everyman, he, she has issues and strengths and weaknesses. Really, an everyman is just that anybody can relate to him. Luke Skywalker is an everyman. Harry Potter is an everyman. Everyone can kind of relate to him. There's a lot of tricks that J.K. Rowling does to make you sympathize with Harry Potter that make him unrealistic. The fact that he's raised under a cupboard and comes out pretty well adjusted, that's not realistic, but that's been done in fiction for 100 years. Okay, let's go on. Is it possible that this weird Thunderfoot kid could also be misrepresenting creationism? Oh, yeah. But he only takes on soft targets with creationism. So this is on Thunderfoot and Sargon. Thunderfoot has never taken on hard targets, and when he does, he basically acts like, I don't know. I don't want to go too deep into it, but he doesn't pick hard targets. He picks soft targets. And that's why he's successful. Anita Sarkeesian, honestly, is a pretty soft target. It's pretty easy target to hit. Pretty easy to tear her apart. It's pretty easy to tear apart a lot of creationists. So that's just kind of what I think Thunderfoot did. And I haven't watched Thunderfoot in a long time. I haven't watched Thunderfoot since this Sargon thing. There's no reason to. No one believes a liar when he tells the truth. To be fair, Rey can have force powers without being related to a Skywalker. I didn't say that. I didn't say she couldn't. Her identity was so built up in the movie that we wanted to know who she was. Yoda and Obi-Wan aren't Skywalkers, but still, yeah, okay. Moving on. The last bit reminded me of Monty Python. Cool. Man, Sargon has a huge head. It's photoshopped. Star Wars is the only fandom I know that will bash on a good movie in the franchise. Okay, great. So here's a great non-argument to maybe close off this video, because this one's going long. Star Wars is the only fandom I know that will bash on a good movie in their franchise. Let's evaluate that. So first of all, it's not an argument. It doesn't refer to anything I said. It doesn't counter anything I said, and it doesn't try to make any kind of point. It's the only fandom I know that will bash on a good movie. So this is a guy who thinks that Last Jedi is good. Right away, you know that there's an issue there. This is a guy who thinks Last Jedi is good and clicked on my video called The Last Jedi, a hate letter to fans. And didn't feel like responding to anything I said, but felt like leaving a comment. And it's a pretty neutered comment, too. It's not like what most people do is go straight for the poopy head stuff. But it's something that's there to... They did this for some reason. They felt compelled to view something that they knew that they didn't want to watch because it disagreed with something that they felt. They felt like they liked the movie, and so they want to be angry at people who don't like the movie. There's more going on with this person than they probably realize. It's like why they bothered to make this comment. We'll leave it for there, and I'll pick up another video with Tom Bombadil maybe in the future. Sorry if this one's long. The first couple are probably going to be pretty long. I appreciate you guys watching, and I will see you guys next time. The books are now out, and they are in paperbacks. So if you want to see the lovely paperbacks, here they go. I'll make a video just on the paperbacks here. So Needle Ash is the new books. I've been catching all the typos, and so if you have one of the early versions, make sure you get a newer version, and we'll have more of the typos corrected. Part of the way that I had to kind of put this out to get it free on Amazon, get the first book free, is I kind of had to put them out a little bit earlier than I wanted to, and they actually kind of went out a day earlier than I anticipated. But anyway, you can get those, and I appreciate it. Hop on my mailing list, dvspress.com/list, and you can grab free copies of the Needle Ash books right now. And I'll see you guys next time.